Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the West River Modified Union Education Reorganization of the School Board meeting. My name is Bill Antone. I am the superintendent. And for the first order of business, I'll be asking for nominations for a chairperson for the West River Modified Union Education District. Miss Long.
If he's willing to do it, I'd be happy to nominate our former chair, Joe Winrick.
He's willing.
All right, so we have one nomination for Mr. Joe Winrick. We don't need a second. I've learned that.
That's true.
Do I have any other nominations? Seeing none and hearing none, I will ask the board on the nomination for the election of chairperson for Mr. Joe Winrick. Please certify by saying aye.
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 Those not certifying, please say nay. The ayes have it. Mr. Winrick, you are now the chairperson and you get your form.
Thank you. All
Your
right.
job is done.
Yeah, not done. Just over for a minute. Okay, so the next order of business is to elect a vice chair. Currently, that's Al Clausen. I know he's willing to continue.
Whether
Hold
he's
that thought for a moment.
nominated.
All right, let's nominate him.
I'll
nominate
Al.
Al.
I'm sure he's nominated.
You were just nominated. You were just nominated to be vice chair, Al.
Sounds good.
All right. Are there any other nominations? All right. Seeing none, hearing none. All in favor of Al Clausen as vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations, Al. All right. And for clerk, currently Drew?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm happy to nominate Drew. Drew, are you willing to?
He says he'll do it. Any other nominations? Again, hearing or seeing none. All in favor of Drew as clerk, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Congratulations, Drew. Thank you. All right. Authorized signatories for this board to sign bills and pay orders, and also, I believe, on the checking account, right? That is,
that's Lori.
Lori, that the authorized signatories for this board are the check signers too as well? Or just pay orders?
Probably pay orders, the check.
That would be the whole board. Authorized signers is the checks.
No.
it's-
No.
Okay.
No. I think I'm going to make a motion
Okay.
to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the officers of the
It is.
authorized signatories. Yeah, pull it down. So I make a motion to make the officers of the board the authorized signatories.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? That's what it currently is. I just don't remember what we can sign off the top of my head. All right. All in favor of the officers as the authorized signatories, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, we got it. Paper of record. Currently, that is the Commons with a backup of the Reformer. That works, right?
Yeah, because the Commons is a weekly and local, and then the Reformer is daily, so depending on the timing.
Okay.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? Changes? Anything? All right. All in favor of the comments with a backup for the Reformer, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right.
Can the public ask a question?
Certainly.
When an announcement or something goes to the Commons, does it simultaneously go to the Reformer? Does it go to both of them at the same time? Or Commons first, and if not, then the Reformer?
It's based on how much lead time the notice needs. If we can't get the appropriate lead time for the notice by putting it in the Commons, we'll put it in the Reformer. And if it's, so no, it doesn't go to both of them at the same time. It goes to the one that's going to get the legal requirements of the notification met.
So
But
if we only
currently
get
under-
one of them, we may get the notices half the time or less.
Well, so to answer both your questions, currently we do both, even though we have one paper of record, just to make sure that during this process, we've been doing both. So we, with having two, a primary paper of record and a secondary paper of record, we've been over communicating by doing both. But you have to name a primary.
That's okay. Okay. As long as you do them both simultaneously.
That has been our practice.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, we need to set our meeting times and dates for the year. Currently, we are the third Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. And we have been holding most of our meetings here. At some point, we discussed moving them around. I'm not sure if we're ready to do that yet.
Can we move them anytime we want? Like if we
As long as we
adjourn at
want,
a,
sure.
if we adjourn at a meeting and say we want to have our next meeting at another,
As long as you post it appropriately.
Yeah,
Right,
as long as
that's what
we
I'm
warn it
saying.
appropriately, yes.
okay.
So do we want to keep third Monday, 7 o'clock, Leland and Gray for now?
Yes, that's fine for the regularly scheduled meetings.
Okay, there's a motion. Second. Any discussion other than we can move them and may as we get going? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Good. Appointment of a truant officer. I believe that is currently the Wyndham County Sheriff's Office.
Yes, we have a current contract with them.
Move to keep it the same way.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion on that? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries. I can't write as fast as y'all can vote.
We're trying to hurry.
I know. That's really it. I do need to get email addresses from everybody just to give to the central office on the sheet up. And home, if your home address or home phone has changed, let us know, because Meg needs to get a hold of you for meetings. But otherwise, that's it. We are reorganized and we can move into the budget meeting a little bit early. Okay. So, first order of business, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda as published?
Yes, I would like to make a statement.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Any other changes?
No, I think that was the only one that I noticed comment.
We're gonna put it under new business?
We can let him do it right now, just add Ken now. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. There's been a little controversy going around, so bear with me. I had surgery on my jaw last week, so we're gonna do the best we can here. Actually, no, it was within the last week. In light of letters and articles written to the Reformer, I would like to put the record straight. At the January 14th meeting, after Mr. Anton's presentation of results of the school choice program, I pointed out that Jamaica's enrollment was approximately where Brookline's was when Brookline decided to close their school. That was the end of that discussion. I asked Mr. Anton, should the board look into the closure of a school in the future? Mr. Anton's response was, the board could not close a school without a vote from, or in that town that would be closed. It is in the articles. I then said, so other towns get to pay the price for one town's greed. Got it. Mr. Anton responded, we are a district of approximately 600 pre-K through 12 students that are well served by the caring citizens and great leadership of the board. I replied, all the other taxpayers will have to pay for one town's greed. I got it. Note, I have used this interpretation of the school closure vote several times in the past. And make no mistake, in the future, all it will take is the board to request a budget from the administration to compare the difference between this district having 3 elementary schools or 2. The cost savings will only have one recourse, to ask the voters of one town to close their school. I've also stated in the past that the school with the lowest enrollment might not be the town to close a school, given factors of location, site advantages and disadvantages, and what's best for the students and families. If the closure of if the school closure vote fails in a town, the board may amend the article of agreement on school closure. This would be a combined vote, not a single vote from one town. Because I know whether, I don't know whether the two people that wrote letters to the editor of the Brattleboro Reformer were at the meeting on the 14th, watched the meeting on BCTV, or went by the January 15th article in the Reformer written by Chris Mays. To any member of the public that were under the assumption that I called Jamaica a greedy town, I would like to extend my apologies. To those who were swayed by the January 15th Reformer article, I would like to thank the Reformer for wordsmithing and combining two separate comments on two separate subjects into one sentence, making me to appear to be nothing more than a callous bully. I hope that in the future our citizens can have the courtesy of asking for clarification and not assuming one's intent. I would also hope that in the future the Brattleboro Reformer would have the common decency to interview myself or other people about comments instead of using poetic license. This is journalism 101. I believe the Reformer owes my family and myself an apology in writing and need to retract the story from January 15th. Thank you. Now, can we move on to school business?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so members of the public, if you're here to discuss the budget or something else that's on the agenda, I would ask that you'd hold your comments until that time. If you're here for something other than that, that's not on the agenda, now's your time to raise your question or concern to the board. Before you speak, please state your name and town of residence for the TV camera. Thank you.
I'm Sue Stomsky from Jamaica, and I am the author of one of those letters. I wasn't at the meeting. I watched it several times on BCTV on my laptop, rewinding, listening.
As did I.
As did I several times, and after listening to that, I called several people in town and said, did you get the same thing that I did from listening to his statement? And they all agreed the way that I heard it, they heard it the same way. Within seconds of being notified that we were losing 17 students, we were then called greedy. So we did. It was a lot of conversation around the village, a lot of little meetings of people, and several of us got together and wrote letters. And that was the letter. I do accept your apology. If you add it all together, maybe I wouldn't have said what I said, but at that time, it fit with what you said.
It's a tough subject.
Yeah, it is, and it is a tough
a tough
subject, and it still is tough, and it's tough for a lot of people in the town of Jamaica. But it was disheartening that a lot of the other members of the board didn't speak up and defend us at that moment. One board member from Jamaica that was at that meeting has apologized and said she didn't say anything. She was waiting to see. Drew wasn't here that night. So, I mean, the pieces are going back together, but at that time it hurt. And I think,
understand.
so I accept your apology. It still hurts, but I accept your apology.
Believe me, that was not my intent.
That's fine, I get it now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rocky Peltzu, Newfane. You had an earlier board meeting, right?
Earlier.
This one in the paper was announced for 6:30.
Oh, Leland and Gray was going to meet to reorganize at 6:30.
At that meeting, did you recognize the passing of Walter Meyer?
Leland and Gray didn't have a quorum, so there was actually no
Okay.
meeting.
But
So,
if it's
no.
not inappropriate, I would like to just ask the clerk or recording secretary to recognize the passing of Walter Meyer, because he was a 1949 graduate of the previous, he graduated from the previous facility of Leland and Gray, and a very strong supporter of the institution, and he and his lovely wife Elaine provided a significant number of children as graduates of this institution as well, and in addition to many other things he did for the community. So.
True enough. I don't have any problem with observing a moment of silence and noting the passing of one of the Leland and Gray's distinguished graduates.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else out in, that's not on the agenda that anybody wanted to bring up? Okay. Correspondence. Anybody have anything? I have one piece that came to me. We received a letter from the Brookline Select Board. Well, actually, we got two, because we received a resignation from Alicia O'Donnell from her position on the board. She's decided that she just doesn't have the time to put into this, and so she had resigned. So later, under new business, we can probably accept her resignation and thank her for her efforts in the 2 years that she did serve with us. And the appointment of that, we checked, and the West River Education District Board actually appoints, in consultation with the Brookline Select Board, her replacement until one can be elected at a warned meeting in Brookline. Brookline Select Board has already written me a letter recommending Leanne Gilson be appointed. If, again, later on under new business, we can take this up, and if that letter of recommendation from the Brookline Select Board is as much collaboration with the Brookline Select Board as the board wants, then we can actually move forward with that. Ms. Gilson is actually here tonight to answer questions, and we can talk to her about it. But those are the two items of correspondence, and they kind of get added under new business as well. Anybody else with any correspondence? Okay. Moving right along. Budget. Lori, you have a presentation, I know.
Bill's going to start out first.
Oh, Bill's going to start out
Sorry, he's
first?
over there.
Okay.
Bill, when can I ask my question about the budget? Should we do the presentation first?
Yeah, do it.
Okay.
Thanks. Everybody get a copy. There should be a full budget, and then there's kind of a nice little two-pager. Just to kind of follow through.
Sorry.
Do you have something else?
You can email them, you might want to.
It was, actually, you do have it.
Oh, it's the one that we have from before?
It's the one that you took to the, it's this, and then also you also have, it was, yes, it was emailed back then.
So is it this? And these? The only thing I don't have is the full budget, but that's okay.
No, you're going to have it right next to you.
And
Okay.
then of course you have the full budget that we've had.
Yeah, that's in here.
That hasn't changed. Sure it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed since when?
You guys got the,
Since you approved it, of that qualification.
all right. So I'm going to go over the little one pager here. Just to give you a couple highlights. The board asked Lori and I to kind of create something nice and simple that board members could have when they were at town meeting. And I just think it's kind of a good place kind of start out as the budget narrative. Just wanted to point out that this budget represents a 4.78 increase over the combined budgets of all the individual groups last year. So if you take every individual budget last year, bring it all together, the budget being presented to the citizens is 4.78% over last year. And I wanted to point out a couple reasons why that is. There's a special education increase of $312,000, and there's building increases of $332,000. If you had followed the budget discussion, you will know that the board authorized for engineering studies to be done in all the buildings, to look at all the deferred maintenance and future cost maintenance. And if we were going to follow the engineering studies and fix everything today that had been recommended that should be fixed when this budget gets enacted and completed at this time next year, it would be $732,000. The board decided that $400,000 needed to be removed from that to make sure that they were presenting a budget that fell in a more reasonable increase, but also addressed all health, safety, and future planning for all the facilities as well. So that total is $645,000, and the 4.78 is a $538,000 increase. So I just wanted to point out with just those two items, it's about $106,000 less in an operational budget. Now, all of you have been to board meetings and been to boards before, and these are the decisions boards have to make, but I just felt it was important to point that out. Special education is obviously a mandated cost. We believe very strongly in making sure that all of our students' needs are being met. And buildings have deferred maintenance that must be addressed, and we also must not just fix what's currently happening, we must invest into thinking about what needs to be fixed for the next 20 years. And then of note are just kind of some highlights of things that are included in the budget, that you actually have a decrease in salaries, you have a decrease in positions, you have a $50,000 investment for universal meals, you have an increase of pre-K service, you provided school choice, and then as of 8 days ago, the yield from the Department of, the Agency of Education decreased. And every time the yield decreases, it essentially means your tax rate increases. So that yield will not be decided on until June 1st. So that can still be in flux, but this is the best number that we have right now. Normally, we would have everybody's budgets would be in by town meeting, and the yield would be almost certain. That is not the case this year. We have, I think it's 15 budgets that have not been even voted on. This one being one of them. And so when you're in a statewide funding system, you can't set the yield until all of the budgets have been. So I just wanted to give those kind of highlights, and then Lori is going to kind of walk us through some serious details of the budget. Is that good, Lori?
That was good, appropriate time.
Okay.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Bob. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, so many of you have seen this presentation. I recognize a lot of your faces in the crowd here, but there are some new faces, so I am going to run through it, and please feel free to ask me questions as we go through it. Okay. So what is the, Bill just really described what this budget from a financial perspective entails, and the board worked on a couple of different drafts, and this was the one that was approved. So obviously negotiated increases, healthcare increases, increases in assessments, which Bill spoke about, particularly in special ed. The food program was also another, the provision 2 investment is in the budget. The facilities upkeep, the overall reduction of FTEs, there was some decrease in audit expenses, and some decreases in other assessments or purchase services that come through Wyndham Central, the supervisory union. snap. And like magic, it does not work. Okay. All right, well, let's talk about the financial benefits. There we go. Just look. Okay. I have this sort of memorized. The financial benefits of voluntarily merging. So you got to keep your small schools grants from all of the elementary schools, which it's estimated at about $178,000. The hold harmless protection really came into play here. If your equalized people were allowed to drop to what they really were, then you would be at 512 and you're at 519, which is much better. The tax rate incentives. As we talk through these incentives, I'm going to point them out through the presentation so you can kind of see where they come into play. We're at 8 cents this year, so there's 8 cents savings on the tax rate. And then there's the 5% provision. So this 5% provision, I had hard time actually getting a lot of information about this. It's sort of buried in the law, but it's there, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as we go through. And then you also had a piece of a transition grant as well. So the total expenses that are projected or that the board has approved are $11,810,000. And you have some offsetting revenues, which offsetting revenues are all of your other revenues but your ed spending money. So it's what makes up your total budget. So the amount that you're taxed on is 10,4. Now we divide that by the equalized pupils and you get a cost per student. So you can see your cost per student is $20,051. So I'm kind of walking through this quickly because you guys have seen this a few times, but if anybody has a question about it, please stop and ask the question. So the threshold that was set by the state was 18.3. So you can clearly see that we are over the threshold by about $1,700. There's some exclusions that you can pull out of that, but really the penalty that is added back onto the cost per student is $1,100. So, you know, putting your cost per student with the penalty at $21,000. So how does that translate into a tax rate? So the cost per student is $21,000. The yield, which did reduce there from 10,666, gives you a unified tax rate. So that means that the board's tax rate for all of the towns starts at $2. This is before the CLA, right? This is before it goes through your town. So that's where it started. And then the incentive, this is one of the incentives I was talking about, the 8 cents there, comes off of that. So $1.92. So if you look in your, I think everybody got an annual report, there is a 3-year comparison that really is not a 3-year comparison this year because this is the first year of the new board. It's a little different in there, so I just want to make sure that I point that out. This was given before the yield change. So I think it was only off by maybe 2 pennies. So $1.90 it was before, and then when the yield came down, it's $1.92. So you can see how that yield plays into your tax rate. All right, so before you get to the CLA, the 5% incentive comes into play. So in both 4 and 5-year mergers, if a town's prior year rate before CLA is less than the incentive rate, the town's new rate can increase by no more than 5% annually until it reaches the incentive rate. It can also not decrease more than that too. So if we come in with a $1.50 tax rate, that would come into play as well. So we're in like we're in the 4-year merger category. The 5-year mergers actually have the incentive that says you can increase by no more than 5. They don't have the decrease in there. So this actually, let's see how this comes into play. So I did a chart on the next screen. It's really small, and I apologize, but let me sort of walk you through it. So Brookline, for instance, had a tax rate before the CLA of $1.71. It's not what you saw on your tax bill, but that is because what you see in your tax bill goes through the CLA. So the maximum that they can go up this year is $1.79, almost $1.80 there. Jamaica, their tax rate before CLA was $1.81, and they can go up to $1.91. Newfane, $1.71, they can go up to $1.79. And Townsend, they were $1.96 before their CLA, and so they go to the $1.92. So no real benefit for them because, actually Townsend's an interesting story this year because they also had a very high CLA last year of 108%, and their CLA dropped to almost 100%. So they're fighting two things here. So they stayed at $1.92. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so after we, see those, and these are what the CLAs came back at for fiscal year 20. We don't really have to worry about that $1.92 now going through the CLAs because we have the 5% provision working for us. So if you go to the next screen, we'll walk through and see for your, so Brookline, who do we have from Brookline here? Okay, so you guys are going to make out okay this year because of that 5%. So I sort of did the analysis of, the homeowner with a house and 2 acres valued at $200,000, what you pay in taxes. So typically if you're paying taxes, you have your tax number right in your head, you know what if that's going up or down, right? So probably not too far off from where you were last year. Jamaica's going to go up, and they're going to pay about $37.60 there. So,
A 10% drop in their CLA.
right. So Jamaica also had an interesting thing happen, and you all from Jamaica, I'm sure you can remember this, but after your budget, or just before your tax bills came out, I think your CLA was changed because you had a reappraisal. Right. Okay, Newfane. So you're going to go up a little bit, obviously not to the $1.92, and on a house with 2 acres, $200,000, you're paying about $34.68 there. Townsend, you're at $38.54 in the same. Forgot the 200,000 in there, but yep, you're about that. So again, the CLA really was working against you this year as far as your tax rate. So I also want to talk quickly about, we don't usually bring this up too often, but over half of the state pays on income based for their property taxes. So, I want to talk about that a little bit, but so the households paying on income actually share in the incentives. And the agency came up with a calculation, which you can see here, that takes into account that 8642 incentive money. So if you are, we'll go to the next one, that's 3.10% difference.
Yep.
Sorry, okay. So if you are a household that earns $75,000 per year, this is what you would owe in taxes. So you just take that percentage times your household income, and there's of course a calculation you do for your taxes for that. So the year-over-year tax increases, can be from a lot of different things. It can be from increased expenses, but it also can be from the use of fund balance that were used to reduce tax rates. So when you use fund balance to buy down your tax rate in one year, it jumps higher the next year. The governor's use of one-time money, that also plays into the taxes as well. And then, of course, changes in your CLA. And as Bill said, the yield can still change. So does anybody have any questions? That was sort of quick, but I think you've seen it and you kind of are getting it now. And And any questions about the budget? Okay. So,
Are you going to delve into the budget a little more deeply, or is that?
I can, it's, open for questions about it.
My question would be on the $50,000 for food as an increase. Is that a policy we've had going on before, or is this a total new idea?
It's new.
It's new.
It's new for West River. New Thing is doing it this year, and it's been pretty successful at getting students to eat, more students to eat. So,
I bet free food would do that, I don't know. What's the theory behind it?
well, I think that, the theory that the board, the New Thing board has talked about is, what? Go ahead. I would love for you to answer that. Sure.
Yeah. So the $50,000 investment essentially feeds every student 2 meals a day. And the reasoning behind that is that we have a pretty high poverty level, and there are kids that don't eat. I mean, there's a food shelf that runs out of Leland and Gray for some of these kids. And there's a lot and this food, we then, this is locally grown, in-house prepared, healthy food for these kids. And there are a number of studies that show that, nutritious food and actually eating, a healthy diet helps kids learn. We have them for a long time, and we're doing a lot of it, but we're not catching everybody. And for a relatively small investment, we can now feed absolutely everybody.
So it is not a new program, it's something we've been doing, and now we're doing more of it.
Well, yes. I mean, there's always been like the federal free and reduced lunch, and kids get fed for free if they meet a certain poverty level. Newbrook piloted this program and fed everybody in the school last year and saw, much better adoption of everyone eating and a lot less food waste. The kids are actually eating the food, and it's healthier food, and they're involved in its preparation and even its growth. And we had a presentation by the chef at one meeting, and he's willing to take that on district-wide, and we're going to see if it works. So yeah, it's an expansion of a program that's been done in the past.
And you're talking now about 2 meals a day? So breakfast and lunch? And is this basically an offshoot of the Head Start program? Or the concept of the Head Start program?
Not at this point.
No, it's I don't think it's related to Head Start at all, right?
No, it is not.
Seems to me like it could be a black hole of expenses. Do you have a cap saying, well, if it turns into 55, we'll cut it off, or we're going to somehow limit the food, or?
Well, 50 was the budget.
Using a number. If it jumped up 10%, what are you going to do? Because these things are hard to predict.
Oh, yeah. Well, the chef is actually predicting that 50,000 is the high number, and that the costs will actually go down as there are more adopters and more food gets grown. Obviously, there's not a blank check here to just, keep going. But, for the first year, it's, the investment is 50, and we'll see what happens. And, it'll probably be an ongoing discussion, and something, since it is new for the entire district, something we'll watch closely.
Well, it'll probably be an ongoing basis of our taxes going forward. That's what I'm worried about. Seldom does a program start and die. They start and cost more and cost more and cost more, in my experience. So that's why I'm concerned that this is opening another door that's just going to... I have 2 concerns. One is it's going to be expensive for the taxpayers. And number 2 is the real education for children, at least from when I grew up and when I grew my children, takes place at the dinner table or the breakfast table. And you're taking away the parents' ability to educate their children at the breakfast table by saying, oh, you get food at the school, and everybody would take the path of least resistance and let the kids eat at school. So I think you're losing a major component of parental rights and parental input on their child's behavior, which has worked in the past. We know that. This is unknown.
True. It is a voluntary program. I mean, any parent that wants to have the conversation around the breakfast table certainly can. And
How are they gonna have a conversation around the breakfast table when the kids are off at school? I'm missing that.
They don't have to eat.
they don't have to come to school and eat
Well, no,
breakfast. I
but-
mean, we're not starting the day any
Okay.
earlier or doing anything like that. We're just giving them, I mean, all the kids have access to breakfast now at school, whether it's provided free or whether the parents pay for it. That program still, that exists right now. This just makes it available to everybody, no matter whether you've paid for it or not.
Well, I hear what you're saying.
Okay. Bucky and then Heidi.
Yeah, I think there's an important point here that hasn't been mentioned yet. My philosophy with respect to education, over a few years' experience with it, is that education is not a cost, it's an investment. And this is another investment in individuals and children in the future. And my question is, has Newbrook been engaged in this, their program long enough, or are there other institutions who have had similar programs a longer period of time and found a positive connection between providing these meals and student performance, attentiveness, and learning? Because that's what we're about.
Ken, you want to answer? You're
I
the
do
Newbrook
not,
chair.
I know there is another district that is doing the free lunch program. I believe they just started this year also. And as far as Newbrook goes, we've had a fantastic response to it as far as, and it's not only that a family's going to turn around and say, okay, from now on every day you just go to school and eat breakfast. There might be days where you run late or something happens that it's a safeguard. It doesn't have to be done every day. Somebody doesn't want to eat, some kids don't eat breakfast. Why? I don't know. It's my favorite meal of the day.
Now, my question was not with respect to how popular or what the participation rate in it was. It's in terms of whether it provides better opportunity, better conditioning of the individuals for attentiveness in the classroom and learning. Because we are talking about education facilities, not social agencies.
Let's relate to this.
I can't quote you a study, but I will just tell you from educational research and readings that having a healthy diet is a prerequisite for the brain to function in a receptive manner.
That would be my logical response. But I would like
in terms of Vermont
like to
and
see
the
established
amount of
evidence.
years that it's been going on, we don't have a longitudinal study that
Well, I can't believe that throughout this country, there aren't other institutions that have been doing that for a bit longer.
I would guess that you are absolutely correct.
Thank you.
My question is for Lori. Lori, I know a couple years ago Vermont came out with an incentive that if at least 75% of the population qualify for free and reduced, that the entire school, or I would assume a district in this case, would then qualify for free and reduced to no expense for the taxpayers. Is that something that's still out there? And do we have any projections of whether, as we merge into one, whether that's a possibility for in the future after we get this moving?
It's a different provision. It's not provision 2, it's universal meals, I believe it was called.
Yeah.
And I would have to go back and look, but I believe that the district has to be more than 50% free and reduced in order to qualify for that. And that may not be the case with West River as a district.
Okay.
So, always looking for those things too.
I'm hoping that we'll keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I just asked Lori what the cost is per pupil, and it's less than $100 a year per equalized pupil. I just think it helps to put it into context, what the cost of that free breakfast and lunch program is. And the other thing is, and Lori reminded me, but I have been working with them for years, Hunger Free Vermont has a ton of data available for anybody who wants to dig into it. They have been, they were, for those of you who remember when we had Fran and Diane at Leland and Gray doing lunches here, they were on us all the time. That program was a great program, but we weren't getting a lot of the incentives that we could have gotten during that time. And when they left the state, we went into a different program, a food program here, and got a lot more support. And Hunger Free Vermont provided so much information for us and help as we transitioned into this new program. And that's worked out well for us over the years. And I really think the value of feeding our students at this point is really important for their success.
Mike?
Lori, we were trying to get grants from the Stratton Foundation. Did those come in, and how much were they?
We can't apply yet.
We can't apply
no,
yet?
It'll be in the spring that we'll be able to apply
Okay.
for the next fiscal year.
So it could be
But we are doing
more or less depending on that.
Yes.
But I believe the Stratton Foundation already donated money to Newbrook to
Yes.
help that program along. So I would assume, going under the assumption that they would continue that on a hopefully a wider basis.
I would hope that they would too, but until we apply, I don't want to, say that we will.
Positivity, think positive.
Let me know when you're ready for another issue.
We're ready.
Okay. I was going to use the word appalled, but I think that's a bit strong. I was dismayed when I saw that the consumer science curriculum was eliminated. I know that when I was a student here, we did not have a consumer science course, but society is a little bit different than a few years ago that I was a student in high school. And I think it is tremendously important. Now, before I make a comparison, I need my memory refreshed. It was a few to several years ago, I believe, that the voters approved a budget which included the purchase of a new kiln for pottery. Is that correct?
Looking for Leland and Gray.
Several $1,000s.
Leland and Gray did purchase it.
Leland and Gray did buy a kiln a few years ago.
You still have it?
Point.
We still have it, yes. Yes, we have a kiln.
Is it the-
Still using it, teaching it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, now, that having been said, I make my comparison. It would seem logical to me that a larger number of students could be better prepared for, as consumers, adult consumers, citizens in the community, preparing for adult life with a consumer science course than a pottery course. And as I said, I was dismayed that you could make a decision like that and not look at other programs. Now, pottery may be a lot more popular course to take, but in terms of looking at the objectives of an educational facility, in terms of preparing students for the future, I think a consumer science course goes a whole lot further than does pottery course. And I would also stack it up against some of the other extracurricular activity courses that the institution has in terms of preparing our students.
Well, I know in the discussion about that, a lot of the skills that are taught there are also taught in a combination of other courses as the students go through mostly middle school, right? And then some other courses.
Yeah, so the Family Consumer Science program includes a lot of different things that didn't necessarily used to be in what was called home economics. A lot of those things have been moved into other parts of the curriculum. The one part that we believe we wouldn't necessarily be able to offer would be the actual culinary part. But students can take culinary down at the Regional Career Center as well, so that option is still available to kids. But the other parts of it, the financial planning and financial literacy, is going to be rolled into our math curriculum. So there's elements of that that are being taken up in other places.
I can't believe that would cut it, because I'm not looking at consumer science in terms of just buying food, although that is a very important component of it, and being able to read a nutrition label. And hopefully they're getting that somewhere. But as adults, they're going to have to buy insurance, they're going to have to buy cars, they're going to have to take out loans, they're going to hopefully have a checkbook. And I've been to a couple of establishments here in the Valley with graduates of Leland and Gray, and they cannot subtract $14.93 from $25.80 without looking at the cash register. And I think that is appalling. And so I think we need to get back to some of the basic skills for adult living.
We actually had a discussion about that as well, that would be a curriculum change. In order to do that, the participation in the family and consumer science was fairly low. I mean, 3 to 5 students a year.
I think we said there was a total, yeah, I think it was 4 a year maybe.
Four a year.
That's because you have it as an elective.
Because it's an elective.
Yes.
To change the graduation requirements and require every student to go through that program is something that we actually said was not feasible to discuss and do in this budget year, because it would require restructuring the curriculum. But it is something that the board can take up in the future as, you know, is it a skill? Is that something that we need to put all our students through? Is a semester-long course that covers the basics of living? You know, I never took that sort of course, but I've heard a number of people reference a course that used to be taught here called Senior Survival, that basically, you know, kind of put you out there and showed you that, and that conversation will probably happen as the board goes forward, but that would involve changing the curriculum and changing the graduation requirements, and that wasn't feasible to do something like that in the short term.
I just wanted to say I would encourage the board to take that relook, because as a person who, in a career as a college educator, dealt directly with several thousand students, and to see some of the choices and the decisions that they make in their life, it's not pleasant. And I think that that Leland Gray is not unique. I'm not speaking just to Leland and Gray on that. That's broad-based, and I would hope that other institutions would do the same thing. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm wondering if there's a count of pupils for K or pre-K 5 and then 6-12, like the number rough.
I have it by equalized pupils, that's the numbers I deal with, but
Want real people. not-
Do you want actual bodies, not equalized bodies?
So they would give us good choice. Discussion.
yeah, I don't have that information.
We can
Maybe
probably
Bill
get
does.
it for you.
Bill's trying to calculate it in his head
Yes,
right now.
Rick.
This one?
I just wanted to mention that information was available in that colored chart you
Yeah.
did,
That was the,
where you broke it down by each school.
yeah, that was Bill's.
That's the
The
elementary.
elementary?
It's elementary.
Yeah.
Yes, that doesn't have 6.
That was the school
It's like,
choice thing, right?
I want to say like 240, right?
Thanks.
Oh, man. I
Is
got
that
mad.
that's on the website,
Do you want a
right?
calculator?
It is. on-
35,
I haven't
Some
had any bill.
point, some-
35.17.
100.
Oh.
We need Bucky.
About 260 in the elementary.
Is that
Bodies.
Sixth? That's
Fifth,
pre-K.
pre-K, and that's estimating
Yeah.
our work with pre-K. Probably, yeah, if you split pre-K on the average, it'd be about 230 to 240.
If that's pre-K 6, can you guesstimate 6-12, Bob?
I think we were talking about next year, it was going to be almost 3, just under 3.
288, 288 and 240 would be my best guess, Ms. Jers. You can have your phone back.
I'll clarify. Can I ask another question in regards to that? So looking at, I just looked at this cheat sheet one, I guess, that was in the planning. The roughly 5 million, well, if we look at the budget on page 14 here for the elementary, it's 5,000,003 roughly over here. Yes, the book.
51% that is.
Right.
of the
It says
budget.
5,307,139, but then when you look within it, the elementary is 4,820,000. Can you explain what that difference is?
I sure can. Some of the costs are district-wide, and so in order to get to that number, I had to take some of those district-wide numbers and split them by percentage, and then it added to the 4 million.
So then this 5,000,003 is not accurate?
No, it is. It is. So there's, if you look at the, remember the budget changed a little bit as far as, you see pre-K and then elementary and secondary. So I had to, when I first presented the budget, I had it as pre-K, elementary, secondary, and then district-wide. So there was a pot of money that was, like the audit. The audit isn't primary, it's not secondary, it's district-wide. So those costs, I split by the percentage by equalized people that you see in there.
Can I ask one other follow-up to that? So because the budget is pre-K 6, that 5,000,003 whatever, how does that impact? Because that's not actually what's going to go to the elementary schools, because our 6th graders will be coming to Leland and Gray. Is that accurate?
The program
So-
that you wrote that up on,
Do you see what I'm saying?
No,
Is
so
that
what you're
it's- I
saying
know
here,
the
it
reason
says
why the
pre-K
budget is
6.
split,
That should
because
be
Wyndham
pre-K.
can't vote on that pre-K 6. But does that money, I guess my question is that 5,000,003, if I were looking at it, is that going specifically to the elementary schools? Or then we have to take some of that fund and also give that to Leland and Gray?
No.
Essentially, for the
So
district.
before
Does that make sense?
Lori gets specific, I would just say we built the budget as a pre-K through 12.
Right, okay.
We didn't look at it. We looked at it as the entire district, pre-K through 12. The only reason we broke it out in pre-K 6 and 7 through 12 was the requirement of a modified unified education district vote. So at no time was there a building of elementary and middle and high and pre-K. It was build a pre-K through 12 district.
But then the spending for the primary, the spending calculation on the back for students per pupil is less for the elementary than it is for the high school, so then it's really not equal. Does that make sense?
You're on page 10.
Now I flipped over.
On this?
So- Yeah, I'm flipping everywhere.
16 everywhere.
I'm just trying to figure this out because it doesn't seem to make sense to me because we have to vote on 2 budgets.
Yeah.
But they're one budget, but then, so it's confusing.
Because of
And I want to make sure our elementary
Ah.
students get what they deserve also, because they are hard to educate. Just as hard and just as loving and deserving as the high school, so I'm a little
But
partial.
it's still a pre-K 12 system. And
Right, but you're spending almost $5,000 more per student in the high school than you are in the elementary schools.
Costs
Yeah,
more.
it always costs more.
Like driver ed is something you have to offer and things like that. So the cost per pupil has always been a little higher for second. It's why we have the calculation of 1.13 as weighted, because the costs are higher to educate a secondary student as opposed to an elementary student. Just, there are more requirements.
I disagree, but okay.
The costs are higher. There's more staff, and I mean, you have different teachers teaching different subjects. You have more electives. You have a broader spectrum. Just to maintain the staff to provide that costs more than to have the elementary school education. It's not a measure of the quality of the education or the rigor of the education.
No, I
It just
understand that.
costs more to do it for when you're offering that broader spectrum.
I understand that, but I also understand that a lot of, so for instance, I have a class of 17, not a large class in retrospect to other schools in the country. I teach 5-6. When you look at a span of what my students are, I'm teaching anywhere from a 2nd grade to a 7th grade level. That's pretty rigorous, and the help and para help there, it's not available to our elementary students as much. I'm hearing that those are being cut, you know, the classroom paras. So I'm just curious how that equalizes out when you sit there. Because if you build a firm foundation in those elementary, you're probably going to have more success in the secondary. My opinion.
Yes, Rick.
I'm Rick. Lori, I'm going to ask you a stupid question with no follow-up.
Remember, you promised no follow-up.
I promise. Under elementary operation, count code 5181, that would be on page 3. Right down under the blue line.
5181, yes.
I just want to know what a non-clerical generalist is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is part of our new accounting system that we're implementing right now. It is basically the custodians.
The what?
The custodians.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That is what the state...
Custodians are called non.
No, the custodians should be called custodians, but this is what the accounting system
Okay.
does. And I wasn't going to go through and change it.
Thanks, now we all know.
Yes.
Any other questions? Board? Anybody? Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, can we go back to his, he did have a follow-up.
Could you just identify yourself for the...
I'm sorry, I'm Paul Fraser.
and your-
I was just following up on his, and I'm going down this list, and you're saying that the non-clerical generals, so the custodians?
In some cases, it might be another. It's the code that, this is what the accounting system calls it. And if I had time, I would have gone through and, renamed everything, but I didn't.
I'm just coming down to seeing a line that says custodial services.
Yep, that's, that would be purchase service from outside,
Contract service.
contract service.
Anything else? Thank you all. Thank you, Lori.
Joe?
Yes.
Ask one clarifying question
Sure.
about the budgets that are going to be voted on next week. I've heard a lot of people asking what happens if one budget doesn't pass and one does, and I'd really like to know the answer to that.
No idea.
Okay.
We don't make a contingency plan for what happens if the budgets pass or don't pass. Once something does happen, we would then, at our next meeting, say, okay, what does this tell us? What do we need to do? Traditionally, in the past, when a budget has not passed, that has sent a signal to the board that you have spent too much money, and we've gone looking for cuts.
So if one doesn't pass, it will impact what you do with both budgets essentially. And it would be a revote on both budgets. That's,
No, you just revote
You just revote the
the
budget
one
that
that was
failed.
voted
oh,
down.
okay, okay.
But it would impact both.
Well, it impacts the entire pre-K through 12
Right, it
system.
impacts the whole budget. It's only
It's a little
split,
confusing.
yeah, it's only split for that accommodation, so yeah, the whole budget would be redesigned and it would be redistributed, but one would be voted.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we're hoping we don't have to come to that. Thank you. Yes,
Thanks.
thank you.
It's a good question.
That is a good question. Okay,
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
I had the pleasure and the opportunity to serve on the first RED committee. And one of the things that they kept trying to get us to believe was that the outcome of whatever the educational districts did, the goal was to improve educational outcomes and reduce costs. I think I am very hopeful that educational outcomes have been improved. I don't see that costs are being reduced.
Not yet, but, you know, we're not even in operation yet. We've just merged
Don't
this.
give me that, Joe.
We're not operating yet.
You're proposing a budget for that operation.
That's right.
Yes.
And, you know, we proposed a budget that would have had some really good savings, but that was just too drastic. You know, we have to move a little bit slowly. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
I'm waiting.
Yes, sir.
Sort of dovetailing with the other question. Do you or did anybody, did anybody crunch the numbers to find out how this budget compares to the combined budgets had we not gone through with this merger?
I think that was the majority of
I thought we built this budget.
If you had not, so are you talking about the individual budgets in the towns if they had not merged?
Right, when you were talking about, I saw some attention to that, but I'm just curious about the overall end. I mean, the point of all of this was to save money and improve services, which is what we're discussing. We won't see the result of the services until the kids graduate, in theory, but we can certainly see the result of the funding, and we see the result on our checkbook. So I'm wondering if you guys had to crunch the numbers and you can give us some hope that we're going to somehow or another actually see financial benefits and as well as the more nebulous scholastic improvement.
Well, on a very high level, the incentives themselves were worth about 20 cents on the tax rate. So, you know, if you had not merged, then none of the towns would have gotten any type of incentive at all. So equalized pupils would have been able to drop to their bottom in each of your towns, and you wouldn't have gotten the 8 cents, and as you can see, the 5% is significant as well. So did I go through each individual school and calculate out what they would have been? No, I didn't go to that length because I had to build a budget of bringing them all together. But the incentives would not have been there.
So Lori, on
That's
the
the
whole,
marriage.
that would be about 11% decrease in tax rate?
Right, at the 20 cents?
Yeah.
Yeah. It really depends on the town too. You know, like I said, there are so many variables that, you know, I know one town that is significantly over budget for fiscal year 19, and had they had to absorb that into their fiscal year, their next year's budget, they would have added that deficit onto theirs, and their tax rate would have skyrocketed without any incentives. So there are those types of examples that I can give you.
Yes, sir.
So does that
Your
deficit?
name and
Joel
town, please.
Blooming, Jamaica.
Thank you.
Does that deficit then roll into the unified district's budget?
It does. And then it's offset by some surpluses. The unified district will not be starting the year in a deficit, so that's a positive. It's not.
You have a question?
Sort of continuing on that theme, it would seem to me that somewhere in the conversation on how all this is going to impact us, it would be a good idea if you could explain somehow how the towns that have been frugal enough to maintain their budgets are going to end up paying for the towns that weren't, and why that's a good thing for all of us.
Oh, can I? No. No, don't.
No. What? We all start on equal foot. I mean, some people brought surpluses in, some people brought deficits in. It all pools together, and if we work together going forward, the expectation is, and the hope is that we'll be able to find those efficiencies and find ways to increase opportunities for our students and eventually start reducing costs. You know, it's more efficient to do things, you know, if you keep doing the same thing in a bunch of different places and paying for it in every place, it costs more money than if you know, bring it together and sort of consolidate the provision of those services. And that's ultimately what we'll probably end up talking about it at some level, and that's where the savings will be. You know, there is, I mean, you just had to sort of bite the bullet and come. I don't think any town ran a deficit on purpose to come into this district and say, ha ha ha, we can make them pay for it. No, you know, the boards are always doing the best they can. A lot of those costs, a lot of those deficits happened because they were costs beyond the control of the school board. Things broke. Different costs, you know, special ed costs increased with nobody knew about it. So everybody was doing their best to you know, run things as efficiently and as well as they possibly could. And then we just picked a point in time and said, okay, everybody come together. Now it's all even. We'll balance it out. And you know, we were fortunate. We had enough districts with surpluses to offset the districts with deficits, so we don't start in the red. I don't, you know, any other way to do it just pits each, you know, we're all one district now. We would just pit different parts of the district against each other with, like, you know, and the whole idea is that we're one, and it just doesn't, you know, all of that's conglomerated now and we move forward with it. Anything else to add to this, folks? We can move on to Wyndham.
Yeah, wait, are
yeah.
you
Now,
moving on to Wyndham's budget, or are you moving on to a window?
No, just Wyndham's town meeting. We can. Are we done with budget?
We're not done with budget. I have a monkey wrench to throw into the works. Okay. It's actually not a monkey wrench. It's a two-sided sword, I guess. I don't know how you want to put it. Disclaimer: this is for my information as well as yours. The act, the hold harmless, 5%.
3.5.
No, it's just the
Old harmless
5%.
is about people, phantom students.
Just the 5%.
It's just
Provision.
5%, it's nothing.
The 5% provision,
Incentive.
incentive. That is pretty much basically, we are there already.
Yes, it worked in the favor of West River.
Okay. So my question is, and I understand everybody's hard work on the budget and everybody's coming in to ask questions and get clarification. And we did cut 4,000 out of the original budget for building maintenance that was deferred. 400,000, right. I'm sorry. 400,000, okay. Yeah, we cut 400 out of the budget. Anyway, my question is, at this late point, would it behoove us, being we're at that 5% cap, to add that 400,000 back in, give the taxpayers more bang for their buck, because it's not going to raise the taxes anymore than they are already raised. We will all come into this new combined district with equitable, maintained properties, and we don't know if the state is going to turn around after this year or maybe the next year to say, this 5% really isn't working, we might need to adjust it to 7% or 8%, you know, because we don't know what's going to happen. So would it behoove us to put that 400,000 back in the budget?
So it would increase Townsend to roughly about 205. So it would increase Townsend's tax rate. Would not increase, well, you have a question on the
It's
floor.
sort of a point of order. You can't do that because your warning's already out.
Yeah, I know.
Well, the warning may be out, but we can, I'm sure there's been stipulations in the past where you wind up canceling a budget vote.
I don't think
Or
so.
postponing a budget vote.
We've already warned it.
We've already warned it, it's gonna happen.
So I did try to get some information on this, and there's some legislative information that, there's two acts that were brought into law. Maybe you can, remember these two.
46 and
No,
41?
actually, Act 132 and Act 73 deal with this because they were worried that boards would try to pad their budget. Right?
Like this.
You mean like,
Well, this isn't padding
No,
the
no,
budget.
I'm
These
not
were
saying
costs
that.
that
I'm
we
saying-
cut from our
could you
original
tell me
budget.
or in what years?
Go ahead,
Just-
Lori.
2016 Act 132 and 2017 Act 73. So the act says the 5% provision is not and has never been intended to be an incentive that would limit fluctuations in a member town's equalized homestead property tax rate, regardless of the spending decisions a new union school district makes. It is the intent of the General Assembly that any large or unusual spending increases by a new union school district would continue to be reflected in the tax rates of the members' towns. And then later on, they sort of refined it to say, if a district's spending per equalized pupil increases by more than 4% from one year to the next, it will be reviewed by a tax rate reduction review committee. If it is found that the increase is not justified, then that 5% rule will basically, you let the 4% allowable come into play and then it kicks in. So there's also, Townsend would go up to $2.05. And you would pay more of a penalty, right? Because you'd be increasing your cost per student. So more of the money would be penalized. And then the effects on the following years, because there might be ripple effects on that, so. I don't know, that's what the information that I could find out about this. So, just so the board has all the information.
So there's no free lunch here.
Well, I wouldn't call it a free lunch. I don't, nothing is a free lunch. But I'll own this is my bad because it came to me after we finalized the budget. And that's on me. I should have asked earlier. And I just thought it would be a great opportunity if we could have done it. And like I said, it's not a cost that we weren't originally planning on doing that we needed to put in the budget. But to make the budget look more attractive, we actually took 400,000.
We did, but we would need to go back and look hard at that, because that was just taking a column out of the engineering studies and saying, to catch us up to the maintenance where we should be right now, this is the number that we should be at. The engineering studies go out a full 20 years of maintenance, and to go backwards and take care of, to then start planning for the things going forward, it's significantly even more than that. I mean, that was picking a point in time and saying, okay, here's what we should spend, because we should be aware of how much we've kicked the can down the road. But the money that we've put in keeps the building safe and does the maintenance that we need to do, and allows for $100,000 worth of future study to bring in engineers to look at, what do we really want to do with all this real estate? I mean, we have a lot of real estate. It needs a lot of work. Students are moving around in different buildings, and going forward, what really makes sense for us as a district. And the building committee's been meeting on that for a year. We'll have consultants working on that, and that will be conversations that this board has probably for the next couple of years about what do we do with all our buildings. How do we do that?
I just don't want to see this board start kicking the can further down the road. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think there's any desire to do that.
Well, if it's in stone, it's in stone. My bad. I apologize. Just thought it was worth mentioning. That would be a kicker if the budget got voted down and we had to add money to it.
That would be a new one.
That would be.
Never done that before.
Actually, no, it happened once in Newfanglin.
It's not happened to me. Okay. Any more discussion on that at all?
I'm satisfied. I brought it up. My conscience is at ease.
Okay. So, next item is the new business piece. Do we want to go through the resignation and the Brookline, or you want to do the Wyndham first?
Yeah, why don't, Leanne's here, so I think
Okay.
that'd be polite.
So, yeah. Does anybody want to make a motion to accept the resignation of Alicia?
I will make a motion to accept Alicia O'Donnell's resignation from this board, sadly.
Second.
I think it's with,
No, it's sadly. I don't regret what I did.
Okay.
So just, I'm sad. I'm sad.
regretting.
No, we regret that she's resigning.
Oh, I am, well, I do regret that she
That's a-
Any discussion on that motion? It's been moved and seconded to accept, with regret and sadly, Alicia O'Donnell. Sadly, Alicia O'Donnell's resignation. I can't change your motion again, I'm sorry. So, does anybody have anything they want to add to that?
Would you prefer I amend my?
No.
Okay,
No.
perfect.
I think the intent is there, and that's fine. I mean,
As long as we have the right intent, we're all good.
I said earlier,
Okay.
we should thank her, thank her for her service. I know, these,
Hopefully we'll do.
I am, she put in 2 years on this board, and she was a valuable contributor. And her, I understand her reasons for moving on, though. She'll be missed.
Yes, you will.
So,
Do you need a second?
we've got a second. Howie seconded. All in favor of accepting Alicia's resignation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Okay, so the appointment of the new one. Again, like I said, it's our decision to appoint a new board member in consultation with the Brookline Select Board. They have written me a letter recommending Leanne Gilson, who's here tonight, to answer questions. The biggest question is, do we want more from the Brookline Select Board? Do we want to have meetings with them or anything? Or should we just take their recommendation, have a discussion, ask some questions if we want to, and act on that appointment tonight and fill the vacancy?
I move we just take the Town of Brookline Select Board's recommendation.
Second.
Okay. So now we can discuss that. I'm happy with it. I'd love to hear from you. You've actually been on a committee that I've been sitting on, but what are you bringing to us? Tell us about your desire to be on this board. Why would you want to do this to yourself?
Well, I started watching Alicia, and I actually know her personally, so I know a lot of the outside stuff that's been going on in her life. And I knew that when she was strong-armed into it, I guess is a good way to put it, in Brookline, there weren't a lot of people stepping up for the position. I started following it, actually it was back on an SU matter. I started investigating some stuff that had to do with transportation that sort of overlapped with my work, and in doing so learned a bit more and got a little bit interested to find out what more is going on, and have been at most of the meetings here since, what was that, June, July? Coming up to speed and I'd really like to just be able to represent Brookline and contribute. And my son's starting school soon, so I like to know a little bit about what's going on there.
Okay.
You went to local school? Yeah, I'm local. Long-time local.
And Leanne has been serving for the last year on the Brookline Board and the Joint Contract Board for Brookline Newfane.
A glutton for punishment, yet another board. Anybody else have any questions for her? Anything?
I'm good.
All right. So we just need a motion, I guess, to appoint her? Appoint Leanne
Make a
Gilson?
motion to appoint Leanne Gilson to the board as Brookline's representative.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that?
Apparently we
Yes.
do.
I think you should clarify how long she's going to be on the board. She must be reappointed next year, or depending on when it's.
It's an appointment until the
You should clarify that in the motion.
Okay, right. Can you just amend your motion?
Yes, I will amend my motion until the next Brookline vote. No, it's not town meeting because they're going to be holding a special election
Oh, okay.
because their town meeting did not go as planned this year.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So we've got that corrected now. It's until the next Brookline meeting where they elect, where they want the election. You have a question?
Just because I'm also on the Brookline District Board, does that mean that would then have to be warned in conjunction with the fix of the Brookline School District election?
Yes,
Of the correction? Okay.
we do it at the same time.
Okay, just for my own personal
No,
information.
absolutely. That's why you're here. It's fantastic.
All right. So we've got the motion fixed. No further discussion, right? All in favor of appointing Leanne?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Welcome to the board.
Bill, you need to make a new nameplate.
Yep. Now you just have to go get
Just talk
sworn
to
in.
Guy and just make that happen.
Yeah.
Get you sworn in, and then we'll get you on the
Yeah.
the special election.
We'll see on the 26th.
And a nameplate.
Okay, now, moving on to Wyndham. You have the results of their town meeting votes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to update you guys on town meeting, Wyndham. So this is interesting because you guys are West River Board, but Wyndham voted on town meeting to leave the Leland and Gray Union School District, of which after July 1st, 2019, becomes part of West River Education District. And so there's a process that has to go through, and I wanted you guys to understand what that process is. So the town clerk at Wyndham will notify the Secretary of State more than likely after the 30 days has passed of April 2nd. And then the Secretary of State has to certify that vote, and they then communicate to the Secretary of Education, who will then reach out to each individual town school board. So the Townsend Town School Board, the Brookline Town Board, the Newfane Board, and the Jamaica Board. And within 90 days of that notification, all four of those towns have to have a vote on the same day, asking the simple question, do you ratify Wyndham leaving? I'm sorry?
The boards or the towns?
The board.
The towns.
The
town people vote.
The town people vote.
People vote.
The school board has to warn the vote.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
To the town.
To the
To the
town.
town. The townspeople vote.
Not the school board.
Right.
votes to do that. Okay.
And each individual town has to vote in the positive. If one town votes, then it's over. And 7 through 12, Wyndham would stay in Leland and Gray, which after July 1st, 2009, would be a part of West River. Does that all make sense? Did I get that right, Howie?
Yes.
Bill.
Did they also vote to leave West River District?
No, because they're not
Part of West River.
until West River took over, exactly.
Okay.
So, Bill, just to
Yes,
clarify this whole process,
Yes.
if it flows accordingly, the 90 days would be at what point at which the school boards would have to warn?
So this is a wonderful example of where the school boards that were elected in March, but go until December 31st, because 90 days after is receipt of notice could be, July 15th, and then you could have a 30-day period after that if somebody asks for reconsideration. You don't have to wait 90 days. It can be any time within the 90 days.
Okay.
You have to have the 30-day warning period. But I'm anticipating that the individual boards will be notified around April 10th. And within 30 days of that notification, the individual town boards have to warn a vote at the exact same time as the others to ratify the withdrawal of Wyndham.
Time, day,
Same time, same day,
The Australian
polling,
ballot all day.
polling
Okay.
SBO at the same time.
Town clerks are gonna love us. And then, so we don't have to have a vote at all.
West River actually doesn't have a role other than to be knowledgeable about it, because you're going to be responsible, but you won't warn a vote, you don't call a vote. It's all the individual school, town districts that I'll be working with to set up the vote.
Okay. But, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if you will, because what are the ramifications for the rest of the district if we let Wyndham leave? Or is there a big thing if they stay, either way, I am unclear of what that means for us.
This board is very interested and I'm expecting tonight that Lori and I will be coming up with a list from this board of exactly what you're asking. How many equalized pupils are we talking? What is the amount of the bond that is responsible? How does that look going forward? What does that mean if, what are the known knowns and what are the unknown knowns? So I'm expecting after this that we will be making that list of what information the board would like.
And that would be public too.
I will be bringing it to this board, and I will be communicating to each individual, the Townsend School Board.
Could I say something to that?
Sure.
Yeah, ballpark, thumbnail, estimate, it's a wash. It's not going to affect much financially either way. It's going to make life simpler for this board because the board won't have to split off the high school budget from the elementary school budget. Wyndham would probably continue to tuition our kids here even after we left. We just wouldn't have a seat on this board to complicate things.
Go ahead, Drew.
That statement is not completely accurate. The preliminary information we received from Wyndham Central actually shows some different numbers, which is why we need additional details. The assumptions of cost neutral that we got early on from central office were assuming that all those students came here, which is not an assumption we can make or should make as a board. It was assuming a one-time $50,000 bond payment to offset tuition, which by the way is a one-time $50,000 payment. So those assumptions that make it cost neutral are not fair to say in public, make it cost neutral, because reality says not every one of those students is going to come here, and I'm guessing Wyndham's not going to throw 50 grand in the pot every single year going forward to make that contribution. We need from Wyndham Central, in my opinion, real numbers. We need to be able to tell our taxpayers what is the actual cost of voting to ratify or voting to not ratify.
In fact,
this decision.
you cannot know those numbers. There's no way of accurately predicting them. You can't predict the future. You can't predict the state funding formulas. You can't predict how many kids are going to come. You cannot predict that stuff. There is no hard and fast. We can estimate that it's roughly going to be a wash. You can estimate one way, you could estimate another. You could have one opinion and I can have another. It's not like this number is a hard fact that's going to be coming out of the central office.
We just said it was a wash, and I'm telling you it's not a wash.
I said thumbnail, back of it, quick estimate of the number of kids and everything else. The number, what we had heard, it was going to be an approximate wash. It wasn't going to be a big number either way. And in fact, as we know, since the state numbers are so variable, there really is no way of long-term predicting how it's going to play out.
Well, let's just figure out the list of questions that we want to get asked so that we can have this conversation. And the other question is, depending on when the Leland and Gray vote is held, you know, that we need to make sure that, you know, because there's also the question of the West River District and in or out, and there may need to be, or we might want to have a second vote, because if there's going to be a clean break, then we should, you know, vote to not allow Wyndham into the West River District, as well as release them from Leland and Gray.
Or the other way.
Or exactly. Or if we say, no, we think that this is, we can vote to accept them into the West River District and not allow them to leave Leland and Gray. And then go where, and we can look at the financial implications of both of those scenarios. And you know, that just serves to answer the questions, you know, that come up. And then, you know, it really comes down to the public. I mean, the votes will be warned and the public can decide. I think, you know, just thinking about it a little bit, it's important to me that it's either one way or the other. Like, they should be all the way out or all the way in. Because the split with, you know, one foot in running their own district and 1 foot in, you know, sharing in the West River District adds budget complications and headaches that, you know, the budget's confusing as it is. So we should just, you know, work through those scenarios so that it's like, here's the way to have them separate, here's the way to have them together, and, you know, we can work the numbers on both of those, right? I'm glad you're far enough away, you can't kick me.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, I understand the budget and possible budget implications, but this is more about the town of Wyndham is making a choice for what they feel is best for their children and their taxpayers. That's the moral question that we have to ask ourselves when we go to a vote like this. Is it about the money, or is it about what Wyndham wants for their children? It should not be a forced choice over money. That's my personal opinion, and that's my disclaimer. It's my personal opinion.
I will also add to that, the vote to leave was 65-2 by Australian ballot on town meeting day. So
That's a big clarification, thank you.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but the financial questions are still going to be asked.
Well, no, I understand
and-
that, but the moral question here is, what do we, you know, are we going to vote just on the solid facts of this is a money issue, or is it based on this is one of our local communities that is making they've studied it, did their informed decision was this is what they would like to do. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to say whether I'm for or against it, but that's my opinion. Before I ruffle somebody's feathers.
So, other questions that people want to have so that we can, you know, have a discussion next week when we know what, or next month when we know certain? Sure.
So we're going to have the numbers on how many students. We're going to have the numbers on if we keep the high school students, but we're also going to have the numbers if we decide to allow them in to this district as a unified elementary school pre-K-12 as well. Because even though they're separate votes, they're very much tied together.
Right, so what you're asking for is to see how the 7th through 12th grade looks, and then you're looking to see the whole picture. And we also want to see if 80% or 60% or whatever that number is of students come to Leland and Gray, and the rest choice out, right?
Yeah, and what number that is, I think, is hard to predict, but saying 100%, I think, is completely unrealistic.
Okay. So some sort of percentage that don't come is what you want to see.
And what's that going to do to us long-term as a district?
Right, for more than just 1 year.
Right, long-term.
Right, yeah. It's interesting because there's no 2nd, 3rd, or 4th graders currently in Wyndham right now, which affected either scenario, it affects it. But,
Lori, because they are such small numbers, are you able to do it per pupil? Does that make sense?
Yes.
If X amount of, so if one pupil leaves, it stays or leaves, it's X.
So the way I'll approach it, which is the way I think I gave you some information already, is by equalized pupils. I know that there, and in the presentation, there are 8.83 equalized pupils. And that's what the financial is driven on, right? So if you pull those secondary students out, and then 50% or 80% of them tuition back in, that'll be the scenario. And then they have overall 28, I think, is the total equalized pupils. So as West River, do they all come in and you have the 28, or is it all out? So those will be the things that we'll look at.
And also, of course, you have to factor in the cost of running our school.
Right, so of course, when you bring in all of the elementary equalized pupils, you would also bring in their budget, which this year is not necessarily a typical budget, but because it's 16% higher than it has typically been.
I'll add also that our school budget was also voted by 100% in town meeting.
Also, just as a follow-up to that, if there was any thing back from the school choice surveys of people that, if that affects it, there may be, I know there was some homeschool families that may come in if that was a choice, or I don't know if you have access to that information, but.
We did not have, Wyndham was not a part of
We
it.
didn't ask Wyndham, that's right.
Yeah.
With you.
Anything else? Do we have data on like total pupils in Wyndham, including homeschool that don't go to? No.
I have their ADM, but I don't know that doesn't include.
No, I can get registered homeschool.
Right, well, we can get some of that.
Just
information.
curious.
Yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Because those would also be potential tuition students.
Sure. I think we can run these scenarios for you.
Well, also, you know, if you're going to run scenarios, there's also another scenario that if at one point Howard was discussing that Wyndham might wind up closing their elementary school also just before, you know, and if those elementary students, and if that was a factor that they chose to do that, those pre-K through 6 kids could also be tuitioned into this new district is a possibility. So we can go endless on possibilities, but let's, you know, get just a ballpark of where that number is. Personally, I think it's irrelevant to what this vote in Wyndham is about and what it should be to the other surrounding towns. Question?
Sure.
What was the wording of the article that the Wyndham voters voted on?
We
You want me to read it?
Yeah.
Shall the Wyndham School District withdraw from the Leland and Gray Union Middle High School District number 34?
So it doesn't have anything to do with the elementary school. They're not included at this point,
Correct.
correct, at this point, right?
But the state board recommended that they be merged into the West River District, and the West River District, until June 30th, can warn a vote and accept them in, and then they would be...
They recommended a lot of stuff.
They would be forced in. I mean, that's just what's out there.
True. Clarification, so right now our tuition into Leland and Gray is $17,000, right?
We're
For this year? yes.
17,000?
Okay. We've put a budget to the voters of $22,828 per pupil. So it would make financial sense for Wyndham to get out and buy back in at $17,000. So why is it that we would even think about this discussion? I mean, that seems kind of silly that you're saying, hey, we're just going to get out and tuition them all back in. Why wouldn't you just stay in if you're going to keep them all here in the first place? I don't understand this discussion. It seems to me like maybe this has some financial motivation behind it or something as well.
I gotta tell you, we're very unhappy that Leland and Gray added a 6th grade to this school. We want our kids, our school runs K through 6. And we have parents, and we have parents who are distressed that their kids are now going to be joining the 7th grade a year behind the other kids. Now, this is something when Wyndham signed up for Leland and Gray, we signed up for a 7 through 12 middle and high school. Okay, you guys are running something else now, and we don't want to be part of it.
Any other questions we need to have answered to have this discussion next month?
Regarding the bond,
What do you need?
contribution of bond over?
I think it's like 51,000 is the buyout.
51,000. One time.
One time, 51,000. That's their part of the bond.
That's it.
Yep.
All right.
If you think of other questions, email me. I'll pass them on to Lori, and we'll have answers to all these. We'll have answers to all these questions at the April meeting, and we'll have another discussion about where we go from here. And we'll know that point, like the vote has been certified, and that we can actually start. You know, we can figure out what we're going to do. April 15th. Yay. Okay. So, any other discussion on that? All right, we've got the minutes of the last meeting of February 18th are in the consent agenda. I think that's the only thing in there. We just need a motion to adopt that.
So moved.
All in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. We have no executive session tonight. The next meeting is 7 o'clock. It'll be in the main gym.
Really?
On March 26th. Yeah. That's the annual meeting. Hundreds of people could show up.
I booked this room.
Hey, there'll be no laughing on that.
This is about how many.
Oh, wait, do I have to move it?
I already did.
I hope we're meeting in
What?
2018 now.
Oh, no.
2018.
Hey, that's not official.
So, okay. And then the budget. Yeah, we just need one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you all for coming.